And Allison, I'm just muting you for this part of it. Great. Well, welcome everybody, and I know a lot of people are unable to come during this time, so we're recording this and it's going to be on YouTube. So thanks for those who are tuning in a little bit later on. And welcome to NCSE's pilot, Scientists in the Classroom pilot. We understand you're a little tight on time, so we'll try to keep this webinar pretty quick, but we'll take some breaks for questions along the way. If you have any questions, you can either unmute yourself and ask them, or in the group chat, you can go ahead and ask them there. So let's get started. So today what we're going to talk about is a little bit of background about NCSE for those of you who aren't familiar with us, a outline of the program, tips for successful engagement with your classroom, and dealing with some challenges that might come up to the actual science itself, as well as a little bit of time for questions and answers that might come up. So if you're not familiar with the National Center for Science Education, we've been around for about 30 years, and our goal is really to support educators to teach science around socially and politically contentious but scientifically sound topics. So some of you might be familiar with our former executive director who was with the organization for the first 30 years, Eugenie Scott, and her focus was really on evolution education. And we started in the early 1980s really working to defend the teaching of evolution in public schools, and this came about due to attempts to bring creationism into public schools at the time. And since then we've expanded to include climate change education as well. So those are our two big areas, because those are the areas that we find the educators need the most support on, so we really focus on those two. So since that time, we have a new executive director, Anne Reed, who you can see on the very far left, myself and Kate, who's here with me right now, as well as a whole other slew of scientists and academics who really work with educators to make sure that the good science is being taught. So the two folks who are going to be working with you guys is myself, I'm Minda, and my intern, Kate Heffernan, who's here with me right now.
Hi, everyone.
And Kate will be doing a lot of the interaction with you guys, and we're going to be doing a lot of evaluation throughout the program to really see how we can make this pilot stick. So why are we doing the Scientists in the Classroom program? Well, we asked teachers what they want and what they needed to really teach these topics. And it turns out that they wanted scientists. So that was an interesting surprise for us, because we thought, well, professional development or more materials, better readings. No, they wanted scientists. And so we asked, well, what do you want scientists to do? And the majority of folks said that they actually wanted scientists to come in and talk about real-life applications of the science. They felt like their students sort of saw science as a really distant concept that people didn't actually do in real life. So just coming in and explaining, no, this is what I do for a living and this is what it looks like, is actually a really integral part of the program. They also really wanted the scientists to come in and do an activity with students and actually work one-on-one, interacting with the students. If you'll notice, they also said that they wanted the scientists to give a presentation on research, and we're sort of pushing a little bit away from that if possible. I think that what we're really looking for is more of that engagement, and if you just go in and you give a PowerPoint presentation for 45 minutes, you're going to get a lot of kids zoning out, and you might not get that one-on-one interaction that we're really looking for as part of the program. So if your teacher really wants you to do that, you can talk about what that would look like, but we really encourage more of the interaction and the activity aspect of when you actually go into the classroom. So why did we decide to set up the program the way it is? So the way the program's set up, which we'll talk about in a minute, is social media interactions throughout the semester, and then a one-time in-person visit. And one of the reasons why we decided to do this is because, first of all, the in-person aspect was really important to the teachers that we talked to. They wanted somebody physically there. And then the other thing was that they actually wanted interaction over multiple weeks, not just a one-time scientist coming in. And so that was going to be tricky for them because obviously they have a really busy schedule, but also for you guys too, because we know that you're busy. So this was a happy middle ground that we came to in terms of how we thought we could address this. So we're going to see how the social media aspect of it works out. We'll be really interested, so we'll really look forward to hearing your feedback on that as well. So who did we talk to develop the program? We had a lot of people we talked to from the beginning of January when we started talking about this program. First of all, we have a really fantastic teacher advisory board of middle and high school teachers from across the country, and they range from just starting out to retired, so having taught for 20 or 30 years. So they really are very knowledgeable. They're in the earth sciences and in the life sciences as well, and they really gave us the feedback to start working on this program. In addition, we have a really fantastic teacher network that we've grown to about 3,200 teachers now, and we expect to get that number even higher this fall. And periodically we ping them and ask them questions as well. And they've really helped develop this program for us too. And then also, you know, we're not reinventing the wheel here. Programs like this already do exist in different varieties. They tend not to necessarily focus on the topics we're focusing on. But there are others out there that get scientists into the classroom. And so we spent a lot of time talking to these groups as well, what works, what doesn't work, what they recommended. And so a lot of our ideas are based off of other folks who have tested these things before, so that we're sort of starting in a position where we feel pretty comfortable about the layout of the program. So for the program outline, it says over the next week or so, but by now you should have already gotten in touch with your teacher, either if it's, you know, a classroom down the street, you can certainly pop in person, but most people will probably get in touch over the phone. And it doesn't have to be a long conversation. 20 or 30 minutes is going to get you really far. So if you haven't gone on the phone with them yet, make that a priority for this week to try to actually get in touch with them. So what should you talk about? Well, you should talk about yourself. How did you become a scientist? What do you study? Why do you study it? How is your research related to either evolution or climate change? And I think in a lot of cases, the teachers and certainly the students might be surprised about how your research actually interacts with these two topics. You'll want to also find out about the teacher and their class. How did they become a teacher? What are their students like? What are their interests? What information will they have already when you come to class? Those kinds of questions. That's going to be really important for you because if you're coming in, excuse me, if you're coming in having an expectation that the students are going to have a certain body of knowledge, you want to make sure that they actually have that body of knowledge. And if not, maybe you can work with the teacher to get them prepared for your visit. You should definitely talk about the timing and be as honest as you possibly can. Though I know a lot of you are really excited about this, if you have a very busy semester, just be very honest about it. If you're not available at certain times, just be really straightforward, and the teachers will be certainly understanding because they're very busy too. Talk about what dates are going to work best for you to physically come into the classroom. If they want you to come for more than one class and you're okay with that, then talk to them about that too. But really, if you feel like one class is all I can handle, just do that. That's totally fine. And then the last thing is talk about what the social media interaction is going to look like. This is going to be really important as well because each class and each school is going to have a different accessibility to social media. Some classrooms are going to have Twitter available to them, some are not. Some of the kids are going to be really into Instagram, and that's an opportunity for you to learn about Instagram if you don't already. So talk to the teacher, they'll know what the students work with, and that'll work out well for you. So the social media interactions, what are they going to look like? Well, again, discuss this with your teacher at the beginning of the semester and figure out what's going to work best for them. In many of the cases in the applications that we sent you from the teachers, it talks a little bit about that. So you should have a pretty good sense of what is going to work with your kids and your teacher. And then the one in-person visit during the semester, again, talk to your teacher in advance about what the structure of your visit is going to look like, what you're going to cover, what activities would work, how long you need to be in the class, and all those kinds of things. And just a couple little tips. Make sure that you're spending the time to communicate consistently with the class you're matched with through social media, and have a chat with the teacher about whether or not they're going to integrate that in some fashion into their syllabus so that you have a plan in advance. Know the age group and grade level and academic standing of the students, where they're at. A senior class in one community might be much more advanced than a senior class in another community, so really get an idea of what that looks like. I'd say avoid jargon as much as possible and really be conscious of terms that you use all the time. Students probably just are not going to be familiar with. It'll be the first time that they're being introduced to it, so be really conscious of that. And also keep in mind that you can ask students questions too. Make sure that this is a back and forth communication between you and the students. And I think the best analogy that we can use for this program is to think about it like a dinner party where you're the guest of honor. So if you were invited to a dinner party, you would in advance say, hey, what can I bring? Can I bring the dessert? Can I bring a salad? Do you have any food allergies? Those kinds of things. Who else is involved? Who's coming to the dinner party? You wouldn't come into the dinner party and criticize the host's making of the food. You wouldn't rearrange the furniture, those kinds of things. So keep that in mind, that this is the teacher's classroom, this is their castle, and make sure that you're respecting them as your host. But also you are the guest of honor, and so remember that, you know, people are going to remember, the kids are going to remember you, and so make sure you're treating everyone with respect, but also you're there to really interact and take advantage of the moment. When you go into the classroom, make sure that you work closely with the teacher in advance to decide what you're going to be doing. They'll probably have activities in mind already, so this isn't something necessarily you have to come up with from scratch. And it's certainly better if you don't. They might have something that they do every year that they want to integrate you into. That's perfect. That's totally great. Make sure that you're respectful of the teacher and students. Remember, this is sort of the basic line. There's no such thing as stupid questions, and it's really true. And some of the questions might actually be really challenging because they might actually ask you to think back to, how can I explain this in the most basic terms? Make sure that you're really thinking about covering only one topic in the class period that you do go into. And remember that the teacher is in charge. This is their classroom. They're the expert on their class. So you don't really need to worry about disciplining students. Your teacher is responsible for the management of the students. And we really want you to see the teacher as a partner in all of this. Also, don't be afraid to ask the teacher for help in all of these things. So if you do run into challenges with students, just turn to the teacher and say, how do you deal with this? What do you recommend? Those kinds of things can work out really well. So I'm going to go ahead and take a little break for questions if people have any, and then we'll go on and continue with the webinar. If you have questions, you're welcome to unmute yourself, or you can just jot them down in the group chat. Okay, so one really quick question that you might have is, why did we choose the social media component of this program? Can't you just go into the classroom and once be done with it? So sure, you can. And a lot of programs are like that. And I think a lot of teachers feel that that tends to be drive-by science. That's the term I've heard a lot folks have used. They teachers that we spoke with and who are involved in this program were really excited about the continued interaction that they're going to have with you throughout the semester. But they also admitted that time is tricky, and so they're really busy too, and they have a lot they have to fit into the semester. So this was our sort of middle ground of dealing with that, to make sure that you get the interaction, they get the interaction, but you don't have to put in as much time as if you were to go out 3 or 4 times throughout the semester. Okay, let's keep going. Let's talk a little bit about dealing with challenges in the classroom. So the reality is you're going to be talking about issues that are socially and politically controversial. There's just no two ways about it. We're not asking you to go in and talk about bunny rabbits and rainbows. We're asking you to talk about evolution and climate change. The thing to remember is the teachers want you there. They really want you there, and they want you there to teach the science. So do not skirt the science. Don't hem and haw about the evidence. Be straightforward. There may be challenges from students. There may be challenges from parents or administrators that are concerned about what you're talking about with the class. You know, the teachers want you there, and they're going to be prepared to deal with those kinds of issues. If you do have challenges, you should get in touch with NCSC, because we're a resource and we can walk you through how to deal with these kinds of challenges. We've dealt with them for 30+ years. Some things that teachers have recommended, that's worked for them. We'll kind of walk through that in a little bit. But always feel free to refer back to the teacher for guidance. You can ask the teacher, how have you guys talked about this before? Or, I don't want to get off track, but maybe this is something we can chat with after class. And those are typical ways that teachers actually deal with these kinds of challenges as well. But remember, the teacher is there as your partner, so don't feel like all the pressure is on you to handle these kinds of things. Remember that you shouldn't feel frustrated or threatened by challenging questions, and don't feel like you have to answer something you're not comfortable answering. Keep in mind that students are students, and these are teenagers, so they might be disruptive in some fashion. They may walk out or try to divert the conversation, and keep in mind that this is the teacher's responsibility to handle it. So don't worry. Let's talk a little bit more about evolution. Some of you are going to be going in and talking about how your research interacts with evolution. This is an area that certainly can be challenging, and is one we've worked with quite a bit with educators and scientists over the years. The challenges that come from evolution tend to be regarding religious concerns. Keep in mind that students may genuinely be concerned about the religious implications for them talking, learning, understanding evolution. It's just a reality. So there's many ways to address it, and these are, again, our recommendations that come from educators of what's worked well for them. Certainly a focus on the wealth of evidence. A lot of students have a misconception that evolution is just Darwin, and it was just one guy, and he had this crazy idea, and now for some reason we're all following it. And no. I mean, Darwin was important, but certainly there's a wealth of evidence and so many scientists now who work on evolution, and there are so many different components and really interesting aspects of it. So emphasizing that. And keep in mind that if students are coming to you or challenging you because of religious concerns, that's not your area of expertise. You're trained as a scientist. And so it's okay to say, you know, that's not my area of expertise. I'm not a religious authority. If you have concerns about this, you should go and talk to your pastor or whoever about this. But that's not why you're being called into the classroom. So I have to add one other note. When I say focusing on the wealth of evidence, well, there's a lot of research, and probably some of you are familiar with it, that shows that just throwing more data and evidence at people doesn't help when there's a really strong social component of why people are challenging the science. And the bigger piece is really what groups people identify with. So if you're identified with a certain group and that group is very anti-evolution, you can throw tons of evidence at at that person, it's really not going to penetrate. So we're not saying go into a classroom and just throw data at students, because that might not necessarily be the most effective thing. But keep in mind that this is a science class, and you do need to come in with evidence, and you do need to come in with data in the scientific process. You may receive challenges, but remember that you're not alone, and the teacher is really there and can work with the students through some of the other components of any personal challenges that they might have. Teachers that we worked with in the past, some of the techniques that they've used for addressing concerns of students is saying things like, I don't want you to, quote, believe in evolution, but you need to understand it. A lot of teachers use that. Evolution is something that I accept as the best explanation for diversity and the unity of life. And something else that educators have said is, my training is as a teacher. These sound like conversations that you should have with your religious leader. So similarly, you could say that as a scientist too. So are there any, I'll pause right here for a second to see if there are any questions about any of that. Again, you can unmute yourself, or you can just type it into the right-hand group chat. So one question you might have is, are we telling you that you need to be sympathetic to students who are arguing for creationist ideas in the classroom? And I'd say certainly not. Definitely not. You can be very clear that there's no evidence for creationism. That's pretty well established. And the students shouldn't be debating it in their science class. And if they're looking to discuss it further, you can either direct them to the teacher, you can come to us, we have a lot of resources, or you can offer to talk to them after class. Some teachers choose to divert class time for this, but we don't necessarily recommend it. You're only there for an hour. So really use the time to talk about your research, how it interacts with evolution, and why this is important. So let's talk about climate change. So with climate change, it's similar, but the challenges that come up tend to be political concerns. Students may genuinely be concerned that learning about climate change is political indoctrination. And again, similar with evolution, it's not really your job to debate the science, and it's not your job to debate the politics. So we don't recommend you using class time to divert into those areas. But you can do what a lot of educators do, and we find that they find this to be very successful, and so we've started recommending it to scientists as well, which is really pulling the science from the politics. For example, this is what the science shows, but there are many different policy options. We know very clearly about the human component of climate change. Let me talk to you about that. We know about sun cycles and that it's not sun cycles right now. Let me talk to you about that. But we understand that you have positions in the policy. That's separate. Let's pull those apart and really focus on the wealth of evidence. Again, an argument that you might hear, as well as just one computer model or one piece of data. And so again, this is another opportunity to bring in the wealth of evidence demonstrating climate change. This can often be tricky for people, particularly scientists who are very passionate about climate change. Understandable. Because the science can and it should have implications for policy. We want policy to be based on the best and most up-to-date science. This is why science is important to society. And this is an important thing to get across to students. But teachers aren't asking you there to talk about who you're going to go vote for and why in the next presidential election. They want you to know about the science. They want their students to know about the science first. And then students may ask you to talk about what this means for society, for policy, or for yourself and your own actions. And when they invite you into that conversation, if the teacher invites you into that conversation, you should feel totally comfortable doing so. But again, pulling the pieces apart so that they're not confusing your decisions about your own personal decisions to, say, use solar panels or not drive your car, with whether or not sun cycles are affecting the climate. So really pulling those things apart for students so they're not getting confused. So I'll take another really short break to see if there are any other questions. So a question you might have is, we're talking a lot about challenges, and our goal is not to freak you out. We're not anticipating any problems. That's certainly not our goal. But we feel like we need to address it because certainly these topics can bring up challenges for teachers, challenges for students, and challenges for you guys when you go into the classroom. We've never had any complaints from parents for this sort of program before, and we're not anticipating any problems. But we want to make sure that you're prepared. And certainly if you run into any challenges, you should be welcome to feel really comfortable getting in touch with us. That's what we're there for. So we want you to remember this is the pilot, so we want to hear from you. And so Kate is going to be pinging you regularly, bugging you regularly, with not only recommendations on how you can engage in your social media interaction and reminders about, hey, you need to be planning to go into the classroom about now, but also you're going to be getting short surveys periodically about how things are going, questions that you might have. You should always feel free to check in with us, let us know how the program's going. Let us know if you're running into any problems, and you can ask us any questions anytime. This is our contact information, myself, the Programs and Policy Director here at NCSC, and then my intern, Kate, who is going to be interacting with you guys a lot during the semester. You can also find out more information at ncscteach.com, and there's also resources and recommended activities for when you go into the classroom if you want to take a peek and look at some good ideas. Just click on the Scientists in the Classroom tab at that website. So before we have about 3 minutes left, we were able to get through everything in a half an hour, which is great. Again, if you feel like you missed something, this is going to be posted on YouTube, and we'll send it around to everybody. And so for those who kind of came a little bit later, you're welcome to watch the first couple minutes. But are there any questions before we finish off?
I have one.
Oh, let me turn you up a little bit. Go ahead, Jared.
So I was wondering what kind of ideas you guys have for the social media interaction. Just hearing about that, I don't really know how I would communicate through Instagram, an educational activity or something like that.
That's a great question. So it's going to vary depending on the classroom. So for example, with Instagram, you can post pictures. So for example, you might talk to the teacher in advance about, hey, I'm going to post pictures of what I'm working on this week, and I want the students to ask me questions about it. Or I want to post pictures about some really cool organism that I'm working with right now, and I want the students to ask questions about that. And so really chatting with the teacher to see, we've already started the semester, so they already have a good idea about what they're going to be working on. So how they can integrate that into what they're already doing is going to be great. Some of the questions that Kate's going to be asking you guys to talk about, particularly at the beginning of the semester, are really general getting to know you questions. So you might even, for example, Instagram, post a picture of your lab, and ask, hey, what do you guys think I did today? And then it turns out that you just did data analysis all day, and so maybe picking a day where you did something really exciting. That could be something really great too. So again, we're keeping it a little bit loose intentionally because each classroom is going to be a little bit different, and we didn't want to necessarily exclude teachers who, for example, were like, well, I can't access Twitter, but I could do Google Hangouts, or I can't do Google Hangouts, but I could do Pinterest. So really chatting with the teachers to figure out what that's going to look like is going to be a really important piece.
Okay.
Thanks for asking that. It's a great question. We have 2 other questions. Susan asked, how are teachers incorporating this into their curriculum? That's a great question, Susan. So again, this is a little bit flexible for the pilot, and we did this intentionally because many of our teachers, they're all across the country. They're middle to high school. We actually have a couple elementary school teachers in there too, which is really exciting for us. And so it's going to vary substantially. What we're encouraging the teachers to do is try to build your interactions into their syllabus. So actually have assignments for the kids saying, hey, you need to come up with 5 questions, or this is a question that the scientist posed. You need to come up with answers to that. So really talking to your teacher to figure out how to best integrate it in. And then again, we'll be communicating with you throughout the semester. So if this flexibility is a little too loose, we'll find out about that. And that's one of the important pieces of the pilot, so that you guys can really give us the feedback and say, oh, that was way too loose and it just fell apart. Then that's really useful information to us. But we wanted to start with a little bit of a looser orientation around it so that we could see how things naturally developed for each of the classrooms. And a question from Allison, how many people are participating in pilot? That's a great question. So we have 20 teacher-scientist pairs for the pilot. We actually, within the first week, had 35 sign-ups of teachers, and so we went through their applications and we kind of shortened it down a little bit, and we might add a couple more people, but we thought that 20 was a good group to work with just for our pilot to get things started and really investigate how things are going on. We have teachers from all the way across the country, which was really exciting, and we actually ended up with over 100 scientists signing up already, which is super, and we were a little sad we couldn't pair them all right away, but we're looking forward to trying to find matches for them in the spring. Any other questions from folks?
Jared, just one quick, hi, this is Kate here. One quick clarification for your question as well. With the social media interactions, that's not when you're going to want to be focusing on doing like this sort of interactive activity with the students. It's only going to be when you go into the classroom to do the interactive activity. So don't feel like you have to like facilitate an experiment via Instagram or something.
No. Yeah. Thanks, Kate, for clarifying. Yeah. The social media interactions are meant to be, as social media is, really quick, short pieces of interaction throughout the semester, but don't feel like you need to have some sort of elongated activity through Twitter or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you guys all for joining us. We really appreciate it, and we'll be in touch with you soon. Have a great day.
Thank you.